Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see that you're participating in this training, getting ready to teach modular IGCSE biology. It is designed for teachers who are already teaching. Designed for teachers who are already teaching or those who are new to it. And the agenda this morning is we are going to explore how the qualification is structured and the key documentation that goes with it. Have a look at the content and how to use this to plan effective lessons. Understand the assessment objectives and the types of questions that will be set to cover these assessment objectives. And we will have a look at the mark schemes and how they can be applied, so we can understand how to use them. And we're going to have a look at the assessment support and resources which are available from Pearson. So we'd like to start with a little bit about yourselves and how long you've been teaching this specification, what you particularly enjoy about teaching Pearson qualifications, and what is the single most important thing that you hope to take away from the from the session. We will be communicating this morning using the chat box facility. So if you could start to type into the chat box just a little bit about yourselves, about how long you've been teaching this specification, what you enjoy about it, and what's the single most important thing you hope to take away. And I will give you a few minutes to put some ideas into the chat box, please. A few more of you, let's have some ideas in there. So we've got someone that's been teaching the specification for 3 years. Presumably most of you have been teaching the linear specification up until now, and are thinking about moving over to the modular specification. A few more of you want to introduce yourself? Some of you are obviously more experienced than others, which is good. It's good at this point to have people that have not been teaching this specification for a long time as well. We have a few ideas about what is the most important thing that you hope to take away from the session. Yes, we do want to look at how changing to modular will affect you and how it can be beneficial, because it can be a very beneficial way of teaching. Right, we will carry on, but you can still put things into the chat box as we go through. Yes, that's an interesting that what you want to take away from it is effective lesson planning and marking. That's what I hope a lot of you will take away from it this morning. So we're going to start off with welcome to Pearson, the world's leading education company and the UK's largest awarding organisation, with an international heritage that stretches back over 150 years. And today Pearson partners with schools, universities and employers worldwide, offering a world-class, globally recognised qualification to over 3.5 million students a year. And it operates in 70 countries worldwide. So we're going to start off by having a look at the specification and the way it will be assessed. So the specification contains details of the assessment model, the content structure, and the assessment objectives. And the assessment model for Modular is that there will be 2 exam papers. Each will have a range of structured multiple choice data and extended response questions. And there will be clear mark allocations and topic coverage will be outlined per paper. We've then got the content structure, which we will go on to look at in more detail, which is detailed in the specification to help you plan and teach with clarity. And then the 3 assessment objectives, AO1, which is recall, AO2, which is apply, and AO3, which is analyse and evaluate, will all be covered in each of the 2 papers. Also in the specifications are the command words or the taxonomy, which is very important that your students understand the meaning of these, because each question on the exam paper will start with a command word, and the structure of the mark scheme is linked to the command word in the question. So they need to be familiar with describe, explain, and many more command words. There's also mathematical skills highlighted in the specification, different types of mathematical skills, and math skills on both papers will make up 10% of the total assessment. The practical skills are also highlighted in the specification, and there are a list of core practicals which form a key part of the content and the application of the specification. And students must understand methods, results, variables, and safety consideration. And the specification also gives details of transferable skills. It enables the development of skills such as scientific thinking, data literacy, logical reasoning, and communication, all of which are useful beyond the exam room. So the specification can be found, a lot of Pearson's resources are available for free on the web page. And the first place you would want to start when you're teaching this course is with the specification. And it is available for free on the relevant qualification page. This copy is a linear copy because it says first teaching September 2017 and first exams 2019. This has been The approach has been updated for the modular route, but the content has remained the same. So you can download the specification. This gives you a route through the specification. So there are 2 copies. There's the double award for science and the modular biology, which is what we are mainly talking about today, although we will make some reference to how the double award fits in. Both exam papers are untiered and they cover grades from 9 to 1, with 9 being the highest. And the key sections to note within the specification are the benefits of choosing Pearson Edexcel International Modular Biology, the qualification at a glance, which gives you an overview, gives the assessment information, which we'll come on to in a minute, which will give you a clearer view of that in a minute. And we're now going to have a look at the assessment structure with a modular focus. If you have any questions as I'm going through this, please type them in the chat box, although we will stop at a couple of points within the presentation where we will focus particularly on questions. So you have a choice of linear or modular assessment. Linear is the traditional method of assessment, with all the assessment at the end, and that works well for many students. If you're happy with that, then there's no reason to change. However, for many students, spreading the exam pressure works better than having it all at the end. And the modular assessment breaks the journey into 2 units with an exam at the end of each unit. And it reflects how today's learners sit other exams and other assessments. So you can choose the right approach for your students. Pearson is the only awarding body to offer a modular route for international GCSEs as well as a linear route. And I assume that most of you are thinking about a modular route if you are attending this course, this training. It can be beneficial to many of your students. So the way the modular route works is the units can be assessed. There will be 3 exam series a year. No, 2 exam series a year. I thought there was a January one. With 2 exam series a year, May, June, which is the traditional exam period, and then a second opportunity in November. And the 2 units are assessed separately and can be taken in any exam series. There's no time limit to the qualification. Students can take and resit individual unit assessments in any series, which is unlike the linear route where any resits have to be of the whole course. So this means students have got more opportunity to get feedback and to improve their performance and get the grades they need to progress. And then they can cash in their unit results when they're ready. So once they've got all the unit results and those are what they want to use, they swap those for a grade, which is referred to as cashing in. So if we have a look at the two different routes and how they compare, the modular route, as I've just said, the unit assessments can be taken over multiple exam series, whereas in the linear route, assessment for all units are taken together in one exam series. For both routes, the exams are not tiered, they cover all the grades. For the modular route, the grades are calculated on raw marks, which are then converted to a uniform mark scale. And this is necessary because not all students will be cashing in the same units at the same time. The linear route, because everything has to be done in the same exam series, the grades are calculated on raw marks only. There's still the same overview of the marks, the same consistency, it's just a different way of that they are presented. With the modular route, students can resit individual units in any exam series, whereas in the linear route, if they're not happy with their result and want to resit, they've got to resit all the units in one exam series. And for the modular route, once a student has all their unit results, they can cash in these results for their grade. Whereas the grade students receive for the linear route are calculated at the end of the exam series in which they sat their assessments. The linear route has obviously been going for a long time, so I assume that most of you will be familiar with that. The changes are if you change to a modular route. Everything else remains the same. The content has remained the same, the assessment objectives have remained the same, and the level of demand in assessments has remained the same. So a modular route is only offered by Pearson. Now this is an example of how you may move through a modular route in geography, but it is exactly the same for biology. You're taking an international GCSE. You start in the September learning the course content. Entries for the following June have to be made by the 21st of March. Then in June, you may choose to sit the exam for Unit 1, which you will get the result of in August. In September, you would continue covering the content for Unit 2. You may want to resit Unit 1 if you were not happy with your result, or you may be quite happy to go on. If you want to resit it, that's available in November. And then the following June, you would take the exam for Unit 2. If you still weren't happy, there is the opportunity to resit Unit 1, although that's always a balance between spending too much revising Unit 1. And then in August, you get the results. So the benefits of a modular approach. The benefit for the students is that it reduces the mental load and stress because it allows them to focus on 1 year of curriculum at a time and spread out their exams for over 2 years, which many students find to be beneficial. It allows them to take exams when they're ready, which is what you normally do in life. Language proficiency, driving tests, and many university courses have a more modular approach. And it also allows multiple resit opportunities. It provides them with more opportunities to demonstrate their skills and abilities and optimizes feedback to improve their performance. For educators and parents, it provides rich mid-cycle data on learner performance. And not only do you see how your students have performed in the exams, you can use Pearson Excel's post-exam analysis and support tools. So we'll talk about this a bit more later, but you can actually have a data-based analysis of your student results after each unit exam. It eases the pressure faced by exam officers, as it allows schools to spread the exam administration burden. And in schools where parents pay the exam fees, it can help with budgeting by enabling families to spread their children's exam fees over the 2-year period. It's flexible to enable you to meet the needs of more students. Because it's modular, there are many different ways this can be approached. So you could approach it in the same way that you approach a linear route if you feel your students benefit by doing all their exams in one go at the end. By entering them for the modular route, they would do Unit 1 and Unit 2 at the end of the second year of teaching, which in the UK is year 11. But if they were not happy with one of their unit results, they could resit just one of them in the November of the following year. So they could start their A-level studies and still resit Unit 1 and then get an improved result. The second route, which is probably the way it was the idea behind it, is that in the first year of teaching, year 10, you teach Unit 1, prepare them for the exam. They do that exam at the end of the first year of GCSE teaching. That gives them the opportunity, if so required, to resit it in November, while also carrying on and covering the content for Unit 2, which they would then take at the end of June, at the end of the second year of teaching, at the end of year 11 in June. A third opportunity is to delay Unit 1 until November of the second year of teaching, which gives them a bit of time to be a bit more mature and had a bit more practice. And then to take Unit 2 the following June at the end of the second year of teaching. There is no defined need to teach them in a particular order. You could teach Unit 1. With this modular route, there is the opportunity to teach Unit 2 first, take the exam for that at the end of the first year of teaching, and Unit 1 second. However, with biology, there are some fundamental principles in Unit 1. So that would take quite a bit of consideration. So as an initial step into modular assessment, you could carry on teaching as you are in a linear way across the 2 years. But as I said, enter for the modular route, which enables resets of individual units. That can be beneficial to be if you're with the linear route, if you're just disappointed in one of your papers, you have to resit both of them at the next exam series. Whereas with the modular route, you can just resit one unit, and you can do it in the November. In the modular route, each unit has defined content, so this allows focus on the separate content covered in each exam. There's no overlap of content between the two exams. This is, as I've already said, this is the Route 2, Year 10 and 11 modular, when you benefit from feedback on performance and have the option to resit in November before sitting the second unit exam at the end of Year 11. And then the Year 11 modular and resit still splits the assessment, spreads the exams out, but it means students have a little bit more time to prepare and they are older before they take their first unit exam. Some subjects can benefit from taking Unit 2 before Unit 1. This is less applicable in biology because there's an awful lot in the Unit 1 of biology that underpins the content of Unit 2. So from a teaching and learning point of view, it's the same approach to content and assessment across both routes. The specification content, number of units, number of papers, total marks, and total exam time remain the same. So the teaching time is the same. The amount of time spent teaching is the same, irrelevant of the assessment route chosen. And you can teach the units in any order, although for biology, we definitely recommend teaching Unit 1 first. The specifications and scheme of work outline the recommendations and suggestions for the order of teaching. Every unit is designed to be at the same standard, which means that both exam papers are at the same standard. There's no change in demand between the units. And the support from Pearson is the same as for the linear, and it includes specification, sample assessment materials, getting started guides, course planners, schemes of work, mapping documents, training and recordings of past training, mark schemes, past papers, plus exam wizard and linear papers. And we will look at the support in more detail at the end of this presentation. One of the most useful tools that Pearson have is their Results Plus, which is well established for the linear paper. It's a post-exam results analysis tool which provides a detailed breakdown of students' performance. If you follow the modular route, this can be applied to the results of their first unit exams, which will help you to identify areas where students need to improve if they are taking resits. There's also a free access to script service, which allows you to view your candidates' mark papers online or downloaded as a PDF, which means that students can look back at their papers to provide visibility and rich insight. If combined with the Results Plus, gives data that is not otherwise available. And this shows you how you can use Results Plus to inform teaching, learning and revision for resits or as preparation for the next modular exam. And resits is one of the many benefits of the modular approach. Students can take and resit individual unit assessments in any exam series, which gives them more opportunity to get feedback from looking at their exam paper and from the results plus. And then they can see where they need to focus to improve their performance and get the grades they need to progress. Students can resit linear international GCSE, but all unit exams have to be taken in a single exam series. They can't just decide to resit one paper. With the modular route, they can resit just one paper. There's no limit on the number of modular resits. However, it's only the 2 most recent attempts that will be available for aggregation to a qualification grade, the better of the 2 most recent. So it's not a good idea to keep putting students in for resits unless there is a real opportunity for them to improve, or if they really haven't got what they need to progress. Now, no matter which route the students choose, the final qualification awarded will be an international GCSE, as the certificate example shows. So the Global Development and Recognition Agency has evaluated and benchmarked Pearson Edexcel's international GCSEs, whether they are linear or modular, and the study confirms the comparability in qualification, size, content, learning outcomes, and assessment. And the certificates offered are the same, so students will not be presenting a certificate that actually identifies which route they've taken. It is just a GCSE certificate, IGCSE certificate. Now, if we look at how students are assessed, assessment is through written, untiered examination. So you don't have to decide whether to enter them for foundation or higher paper. They are untiered and it's all written. All students sit the same papers, which are then graded from 9 to 1. The questions are designed to be accessible across the full ability range, while giving more able students the opportunity to show their ability. So the key features: schools can choose linear or modular exam options. There's no difference in content, but there is a change of when each of the specification points are assessed. There's no separate practical exam. It is expected that students will experience all of the core practicals, but the assessment of their abilities will be assessed within the written paper. Paper 1 and paper 2 share similar question styles. They will each assess different content without any crossover. This is one of the changes from the linear route. You know exactly which content, which area of content will be on which exam paper. And on both papers, you will find a range of question types, including multiple choice, short answer, long answer, data-based and planning questions. And there will be a similar distribution of the different types of questions on all exam papers. So if we look, this from the specification gives you the content summary for each of the 2 papers. So Unit 1 is topics 1 and 2. Unit 2 is topics 3, 4, 5, and 6. Because topics 1 and 2 are much heavier want of a better way of putting it, and also underpin a lot of what comes next, particularly topic 2. So if we compare the two papers, they're both assessed by Pearson externally. There's no internal assessment, it's all external assessment. They are available in both the November and June series. There is a range of question styles, multiple choice, short answer. There will be calculations on all papers. Maths accounts for 10% of the marks, which is spread throughout the paper in the context of the exam questions. A calculator may be used. Students are being assessed on their ability to analyse data, not on their arithmetical ability. Each paper is worth 90 marks, and each paper is worth 50% of the qualification. So this shows in more detail how the content is split. The topic numbers used are linear. Again, it's Unit 1 and Unit 2 are the same for the double award, as opposed to the biology, but the question papers will be different. Unit 1 is the nature and variety of living organisms, and Unit 2 is the structure and function of living organisms. Sorry, topic 1 and topic 2. Unit 2 is the second part of structure and function of living organisms, reproduction and inheritance, ecology and the environment, and the use of biological resources. When things are in bold and within the specification when they're in bold, at this point the cloning is separate biology content only. So again, the linear specification, all topics can be assessed in both exam papers, although the specification identifies some areas that will only be in paper 2. The modular specification splits the content across the 2 units so that you know which content will be on which paper. And they're both 1 hour, 40-minute examinations, both in 90 marks, and they're both 50% of the total GCSE. In the modular specification, bold specification points still appear. So this is an example of cell structure. On the linear paper, these would only appear on paper 2. Now, in the modular route, these are assessed within the paper that contains that specific topic. It differs from the linear assessment. But for the modular assessment, the bold specification points should be treated as standard content within their topic area and taught accordingly, but they show what is biology only and won't be assessed in double award, and they also show areas that require greater depth, greater understanding. So they're part of the specification point, they should be taught as that, but they are requiring a little bit more depth. So this is an example from topic 1. So all of these will be assessed in paper 1, but not in paper 2. Whereas on linear, it's the bold specification points that will only be asked on paper 2. When the questions are written, they are carefully sequenced, so each question as they work through it increases in demand, and also the paper increases in demand going from question 1 to question 8 or whatever. They're carefully sequenced to improve accessibility to students and improve confidence as they work through, but also to differentiate between the grades. And within individual questions, the parts also get harder, and many of them will start to recall, then moving to application and evaluation. This is to ensure that all papers have some areas that are accessible to all students. Oh, sorry, all questions have some parts that are accessible to all students. And this type of structure helps assess the full range of abilities and supports accessible progression through the paper. It's important that you train your students to pace themselves, because the early questions may feel easier, but the challenge builds as they work through the paper. Paper 2 also has a comprehension question. A comprehension style question to set the scene. So a short passage or stimulus material is provided. This is sort of paving the way for those of you that go on to A-level, international A-level GCSE, where there is stimulus material provided in advance of the exam. So the follow-up questions from the stimulus material are based on the text, but it's not just a comprehension exercise. They draw, to answer them successfully, you need to draw from across the specification. And they may be synoptic, which links knowledge from multiple topics. Students should expect unfamiliar context, but all answers are accessible through thorough knowledge of the specification. And this applies to a number of the questions. They may be given context that is unfamiliar, but in order to answer the question, either they'll be given enough information in the question, or it is asking them to apply what they know to an unfamiliar situation. And it's a good idea to practice applying their known biology to new scenarios. So this is an example of a text. I won't ask you to read it now, but you have all got access to these slides if you want to go back and look at it afterwards. And then it talks about megalodon. It tells you it's an animal, and it asks you which features it shares with the fungus yeast. They do not need to actually know anything about megalodon. They need to just know what features an animal shares with a yeast cell. And then it says a predatory toothed whale replaced the extinct megalodon and consumed the same sources of food, and explain how evolution may have caused extinction of the megalodon. Again, this is applying their knowledge of evolution to a new situation. It's knowledge that they should have. Right, I have covered quite a lot of ground there. I'm sure that some of you have got questions. We'll take 5-10 minutes for you to put your questions into the chat box, and I will answer them as best I can. So let's have somebody starting with some questions, please. We must have some questions after all that I've covered so far. I'll think there's nobody there if I don't get any questions. Well, I hope that means that I am covering what you want to know and not that I've lost you all completely. There will be further opportunities for questions, but if you have any, you can put them in the chat box at any point as we are going through. Can I just ask you quickly to put in the chat box, have you already made a decision to move to modular, or are you still considering it? And if you are considering it, is this helping you to make your decision? Quick response from some of you, and then we'll move on. That's interesting. Is it the fact that modular is available, is that what made you choose Pearson or move to Pearson? Yeah, that's interesting. I have taught modular in the past and I found it had many benefits. It is no longer available in the UK, but when I did teach it, I found it had many benefits. Right, we will move on, but if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat box as we go through, because it is quite an intense session. We're now going to look at how the content is broken down. So topic 1 is the nature and variety of living organisms. And this really is the foundation of biology, really. So it does make sense to teach it first. Characteristics of living organisms, variety of living organisms, and this includes protoctis, bacteria, and viruses. The assessment of this topic will account for about 5% of the total exam marks. It's heavily vocabulary and classification based, and this section is quite often tested through multiple choice questions, definitions of words, and short structured questions. Structure and functions in living organisms, part 1. This is a core topic. It explores how living organisms are built and how their systems work to maintain the life processes. So the key subtopics are organization, structure of cells, biological molecules, transport, different types of transport in and out of cells, nutrition, looking at both plants and humans, respiration, aerobic and anaerobic, gas exchange in both leaves and lungs, and how organisms are adapted for this. So it spans a large number of concepts and practicals, and it underpins much of the understanding needed for later topics. And this accounts for a significant proportion of the marks on paper 1. And both plants and animals are considered. which is important. It's not just about animals, and it ties in with progression from the primary and the Key Stage 3, and then carrying on to the International A level. So a lot of biology you learn, you come back to the same ideas and learn them in more detail, learn about them in more detail each time. And then if we get on to topic 3, which is the second part of structure and function in living organisms, so it takes it further and it explores how living organisms are built and how their systems work to maintain the life processes. So it looks at transport system, excretion, coordination and response. And again, it is both plants and animals, and the exemplar species for animals is humans. And again, it covers a large number of concepts and practicals and underpins much understanding needed for later topics. And then we move on to topic 4, which is reproduction and inheritance, which looks at how genetic information is inherited, expressed, and varied across generations. So it looks at reproduction, difference between asexual and sexual reproduction, looks at plants and humans, and then it lists one of the core practicals, seed germination investigation. And then we move on to inheritance, DNA structure, the genome, and then following on from that, protein synthesis. And there's a list of key terms which need to be learnt and understood because they're not familiar words. The type of monohybrid cross, and then a comparison of meiosis and mitosis. And this topic introduces abstract and technical concepts, which is a higher level of understanding, and models, diagrams, and genetic simulations can greatly help support student understanding. We've then got ecology in the environment, how living organisms interact with each other and their surroundings, and the impact of human activity. So we've got organisms in the environment, feeding relationships, cycles, the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. And it's the nitrogen cycle that students often find challenging. And then the human impact. Both the nitrogen cycle and the greenhouse effect are quite abstract ideas that are quite complex. So you might find breaking these down with animations or visual flow diagrams help your students understand them. And practical skills include some ecology skills, measuring population size and biodiversity in contrasting habitats. And then we move on to topic 6, which is the use of biological resources. And we look at food production, selective breeding, which has gone on for many, many years, genetic modification, which is a newer idea, and cloning. So it combines real-world applications with complex concepts such as genetic engineering and fermenter conditions. And visual aids and simplified process diagrams can be useful. So, having looked at the content and the topics, a bit more time for discussion. Can you put into the chat box which of all the topics your students find the most challenging and why? So we'll start with that, most challenging topics and why. in the chat box, please. Let's have some ideas, please. Somebody start it off with what they found, what topic the students find most challenging. Thank you. Enzymes. Yes, I can understand that because it's quite an abstract idea. Any more? Ah, yes. Yes, I can understand that the language, if English is not your first language, some of the terminology is quite difficult. Would anybody like to put in an idea of how they teach the more challenging topics? Just one or two ideas from you would be nice. If you've got the opportunity to take them to a genetics lab, that is a wonderful experience. And again, using a naturalist if you've got the opportunity. And actually, I always found seeing the organisms where possible, doing field studies, field work that enabled you not only to do the ecology part of the specification, but to actually see some of the less common animals. And as you are all in different parts of the world, your access to different habitats will probably be very, very varied. Right, we are going to move on now to have a look at, yes, scaffolding always helps, and being interactive rather than just talking, taking notes. Any interactive activity is always a good idea. So we're going to go on to look at the assessment objectives and think about how we can use those. And there are 3 assessment objectives. And these assessment objectives they're tested across both papers. They are consistent in GCSE and A level. The proportion of them changes at different levels, but the actual meaning of the assessment objectives is the same across both GCSE, across all science GCSEs and A levels. So AO1 is knowledge and understanding of biology, and that accounts for between 38 and 42% on each of the papers. Both papers are the same, weighted the same. AO2 is application of knowledge and understanding and analysis and evaluation of biology. And AO3 is experimental skills and analysis and evaluation of data and methods. So that is the practical based assessment objective, and that accounts for between 19 and 21%. So AO1 is recall of definitions, recall of concepts. AO2 is the application of that knowledge. So it's applying understanding to unfamiliar contexts and interpreting data. And then AO3 is experimental skills and analysis, and it requires interpretation of information, evaluating evidence and methods, and designing practicals that are not a core practical. All questions are designed to assess these assessment objectives. The students need to understand how they're being assessed, because there's a lot of application. It's not just content recall. So AO1 is demonstrating knowledge and understanding, recalling facts, definitions, processes, and concepts accurately. Many students like it, particularly those who are willing to work hard. It's predictable and straightforward to prepare for. AO1 alone won't secure top marks, so it's important that you build in opportunities to apply and analyse knowledge too. So typical AO1 question: diagram of a cell found in the lining of the human small intestine, and then asking you which of the label structures is a microvillus. And then asks you to describe how a sample of urine could be tested for glucose. So it's a technique that's been learned, testing a sample of urine. The command word is describe, so it is recall of knowledge. If we move on to AO2, that is applying your biological knowledge to familiar and unfamiliar contexts. And it includes qualitative and quantitative analysis. So the command words are often suggest, explain, evaluate. And students can look at the question and think, I've not been taught this, but they will be assessing taught content, but in a different, an unfamiliar situation. And it can require deeper thinking or multi-step reasoning. So it's application out of what they know. So to enable your students to answer AO2 questions, modelling, structure, practice, and making links across topics. And it challenges students to think like students. Most of the maths questions are AO2 questions. So a typical AO2 question shows a section of a frog heart. So this is an unfamiliar situation. They are not required to know the structure of the frog's heart. What they need to do is apply their knowledge of the structure of the human heart to compare it to the frog's heart, and then explain why the structure of frog heart means it's unable to move for long periods of time. And it's unfamiliar situation, and it's an explain question, so it is AO2. AO3 is analysing and evaluating data methods and experimental design. Involves making judgments, and it applies to practicals, but it's not limited to core practicals. Students can be given an unfamiliar practical situation and asked to use their knowledge to design or develop the practical techniques. So it focuses on variables, controls, data interpretation, and conclusions. May ask about improvements, limitations, or experimental design. And it often uses higher level command words such as evaluate, discuss, or justify. So students need to be confident with the different types of variables, the common sources of error, and how to improve investigations, and interpreting experimental data. And again, it's about thinking critically like a scientist. So a typical AO3 question, breathing and heart rate are often related. Design an investigation to find out if a change in breathing rate also produces a change in heart rate. So it's taking information that they've got and applying it to a new situation, a new experimental design. And that's a 6-mark question. And we'll be looking for things like control of variables and designing a good investigation. And then the second part, 1-mark question, state why the test tubes are placed in a water bath for 10 minutes before mixing the contents. That is a straightforward question about experimental design. So we're now going to go on to look at different types of questions and the command words that are used. And please do put any questions into the chat box as we go through. So there will be a range of question types across both papers. Each part of a question will target different skills from recall to evaluation. There'll be multiple choice questions. These can assess any of the 3 assessment objectives. Multiple choice questions are not necessarily easy questions. They can require quite a bit of analysis, or sometimes it can be a maths question. There'll also be short answer questions between 1 and 3 marks, with the common command words describe, suggest, or explain. And they require clear, concise responses using scientific language. It is important that students use the correct language and they are precise in their answers. So, for instance, in a practical question, keeping everything the same will not generate any marks. They need to be specific about what they're changing and what they're keeping the same in any of the questions. And then you get the longer response questions between 4 and 6 marks, which may involve explain, evaluate, discuss, or plan, and they often need structured multi-point answers. That's an interesting question. There's the obvious things like asking for extra time. You may find that your students benefit from the route that takes Unit 1 at the beginning of Year 11 rather than at the end of Year 10, because that gives them that bit longer to develop their English skills and become more proficient. The other option is to do both exams at the end of Year 11, but if you want to split them, you might find it beneficial to take the route where the Unit 1 exam is taken early in November of Year 11 rather than at the end of Year 10. And the longer response questions quite often include experimental planning, which focuses on methodology, variables, and controls. And it tests practical understanding and AO3 thinking. And then the maths-based questions include calculations, graph plotting, and data analysis. and they are often in AO2, sometimes AO3. Maths, there isn't a maths section on the paper. The maths questions are in the context of different questions on the paper. So they will always be in a context, they will not be standalone, a maths section on the paper. And then we've talked about the comprehension section in paper 2, which begins with a scenario to assess synoptic understanding. And then it's a good idea to expose your students to each style early and model how to approach them. So if we think about multiple choice, they're not always simple recall. They can involve in application, interpretation. Paper 1 can have up to 10 multiple choice questions. Paper 2 can have up to 5. Only 15% of the marks on the paper are for pure recall. So many multiple choice questions require deeper thinking. So they need to be confident in interpreting data and applying logic. Elimination strategy with multiple choice is often key to success. So use it diagnostically. So an example of a multiple choice question: which label gland produces luteinizing hormone? That's fairly straightforward. Then we've got a question on a section of DNA. So that requires more analysis of different parts of knowledge. First of all, they need to know the structure of DNA and know the complementary bases. Then they need to know which base is complementary with which, and then they can identify the answer. So if we think about command words, the most common ones are describe, explain, and suggest. There is a list of command words in the specification, and it is important that students are familiar with them. There's no need for long sentences, just accurate, credit-worthy points. These are the short answer questions, 1 to 3 marks, and these are the common command words you will find for those. So encourage students to match the number of points to the number of marks. It's the points that matter. They do not need to fill all the lines that they are given. Every year when papers are written, a few more lines are added to try and make sure that all students fit their answers into the answer box. And the more lines that are given, the more students write. They do not need to fill all the boxes. They need to take account of the number of marks available. So, typical question: describe the biological consequences of sulfur dioxide release and 3 differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. The longest questions, even for the longer questions, the mark schemes are point-based. There's no level-based questions on our GCSE. So the mark scheme will give a list of points, and there's 1 mark per valid point. There's no need for full sentences, although they need to make sense. To answer effectively, students need to focus on precise, accurate scientific language. Bullet points are acceptable. And as I've said, look at the mark allocation, not the number of lines. Spelling and terminology. Encourage your students to spell correctly as far as possible. However, phonetic spelling is accepted unless the word could be confused with another. And there's certain biological words that always need to be spelled correctly, because if not, they could be confused with something else. So photosynthesis with an F is fine, because it can't be anything else. Mitosis and meiosis need to be spelt they really need to be spelt correctly, because otherwise it's difficult to distinguish between them. So these are longer questions. Design an investigation to find the carbon dioxide concentration for maximum crop yield. Explain how vaccination protects the body from disease. That's explain. Explain questions need a because or a therefore in the answers. And that's a design. So AO3 questions, very often they're the 6-mark question. They involve planning an experiment in an unfamiliar context. They're not based directly on core practicals. They require students to apply principles. And if students are familiar with CORMS, and they can use that to plan effectively. Change, organism, repeat, measure, and what you're going to keep the same. And again, they need to be specific. Avoid vague terms. So just saying the same fish will not be enough. They need to say the same species of fish. They need to give amount is very rarely worthy of credit. They need to say volume, mass, length, a specific measurement. Repeat at each value exactly what you're going to measure, and specify units and time intervals. And when you need to be specific about the variables that they're going to control. So this gives you an example of a mark scheme to the question we looked at before. So mark schemes will be set out like this. It will tell you what they're going to change. It requires 3 or more concentrations, so just 2 is not the same, not enough. What plants are the same species? Repeat each concentration. What they are going to measure, and because it's a crop yield, it has to be linked to the seeds. Height's not sufficient. You need a stated sensible time, and examples of variables that you're going to keep the same. This one is design an investigation to discover the effect of vinegar on the digestion of starch. And again, the mark scheme will be set out like this using CORMS, and students need to be familiar with this. And when they're designing their investigation, they don't need to actually write down CORMS in their design, but they need to be aware of it and check that they've covered all the points when they're writing their answers. So, command words. Many students only describe when the question asks for explain. And if it asks for explain, they will not get full marks for a simple description. It's a common taxonomy across all international GCSE sciences, and it's in the appendix of the specification. And students should be familiar with this. That gives a list of the command words. So some of the command words have different cognitive demands. So state and describe are lower cognitive demands because they are just recall. And then they increase in demand until you get to explain and evaluate and discuss. So the sample assessment material is available for you on the Edexcel website. They won't be penalised for writing columns, no, but it is not actually necessary, and they need to explain what they mean by it. So to just write change or see and then what they're going to change, they need to expand on that a little bit to apply it to the investigation that they are devising. So this gives you the access to the sample assessment material. There are now some past exam papers as well, but because it's a fairly new course, they are only just becoming available. But the sample assessment material available online enables you to give your students experience of the type of exam papers that they will be taking. And for straightforward biology, each paper is 90 marks, 1 hour 40 minutes, and it's Unit 1 and Unit 2. For the double award, each paper is 60 marks and it's 1 hour 10 minutes. And then there are 2 biology papers, 2 chemistry and 2 physics. Right, I think we'll come on to the discussion at the end. And first of all, we'll have a look at the core practicals. Now, the core practicals are fully embedded in the course and they're assessed through the written papers. And they build both subject knowledge, investigative skills, and they make up 19 to 21% of the marks. So they make up at least 50, practical skills make up at least 15% of the total exam marks. When these exam papers are written, each one is checked to make sure it's balanced correctly across the different assessment objectives, that there's across the content, and that there's at least 15% of the marks are based on practical skills, at least 10% of the marks are based on math skills. So each paper is carefully checked individually to make sure it meets criteria. Students really gain from actually carrying out the practicals. If at all possible, they should carry out all the core practicals as they go through the course, not as a standalone practical at the end, but where they are embedded in the specification. So this is a list of the core practicals. The vast majority of them just use basic laboratory equipment. So you should really aim to carry out all the core practicals. And as we've said, there's no coursework. Core practicals are assessed via written exam questions, and the questions cover both core practicals and related practical techniques. And the apparatus and techniques list aligns with UK GCSEs. And they can appear across AO1, AO2 and AO3, depending on what you are asked to do. If it is a straight recall, it will be AO1. If it's application of practical skills to a new situation, it will be AO3. And when you're doing practicals, it should be used to teach good scientific method. There is also a list of extra practicals. Students won't be specifically asked about the extra practicals, but it's always as much practical work as possible helps develop their skills. So they might be asked to solve problems in a practical context, apply scientific knowledge to experimental scenarios, plan investigations and select appropriate techniques, or describe or demonstrate methods and safety procedures. Identify variables. Record results methodically with precision. So they might be given some data and asked to record it in the correct way. Analyze and interpret data to draw conclusions. They will be expected to use technical language, and carry out calculations and interpret graphs. And they need to know how to assess accuracy, reliability, and validity. So this is a typical practical question. It's related to farmers keeping their animals indoors or outdoors. So that's the context of the question. The actual methodology is quite straightforward, something that can be carried out in a lab. It gives a method, it gives them some results, then it asks them to identify variables, to give the dependent variable, to give one reason why it's the same volume of water in each beaker. Then you've got the math skills, calculating the difference. And then the final part of the question. So you can see that it's increasing in demand as you go through the question as well. And then the final part, the student concludes that it's better for farmers to keep their animals indoors, discuss this conclusion. This requires the drawing together of different pieces of information, both from the experiment that's been carried out and from their knowledge of the use of biological sciences. And then the final part, describe how the student could modify his investigation to find out if an animal's body size affects heat loss. 2 marks. Fairly straightforward. What would you change to look at? But again, it's applying knowledge to a new situation. It's not a core practical. So the advice is to ensure all core practicals are completed during teaching. It can sit alongside theory or be in standalone sessions, but it should be within the context of the part of the specification that you are currently teaching. They should record their method, their observations, their results, and their analysis. Doesn't have to be in a lab book. Class exercise books or loose leaf paper are fine. It can be done as carousel approach or group work. Group work is valid as long as all students gain the experience. The additional practicals can be used to expose students to more unfamiliar context to best prepare for assessment. And then we've got a list of the additional practical investigations, which partly depend on what you've got access to. It's important to embed practical skills. Plan them into the schemes of work. Use them to reinforce scientific theory. And while you're doing practicals, make sure the students are aware of what's being measured and why, how to control the variables, what makes the results valid. Encourage reflection on results. Even bad data provides learning. And there are additional free resources, again, available on the website regarding practicals. And again, I think we will come back to discussion at the end. Unless you've got any questions. If you've got any questions, please put them up as we go through. I would imagine you're teaching in a variety of situations, going from absolutely super duper top of the range labs to perhaps slightly more restrained availability. Has anybody got any questions? I'll pause for a few minutes if anybody wants to put any questions in. Right, I will move on. I want to make sure we've got some time to talk about the mark schemes. So maths is obviously essential for success in biology. You need to be able to analyse data. It's within the science context. It's worth 10% of marks in the biology qualification. It supports data analysis, calculations in experiments. When you've got your data, you need to know what to do with it, graphing and evaluating patterns. And it supports AO2 and AO3 performance. And there's a full list of skills in the specification appendix, which include percentages and ratios, averages and estimates, standard form and significant figures, plotting and interpreting graphs, rearranging equations. Those are probably the ones that come up most often. And embed these in regular lessons. They can give data as a starter activity, you can give it as homework, you can use it to apply to analysing data from practicals they have carried out. And practice it in real biology contexts. There's always an idea to introduce it in Key Stage 3. And as I say, build routine exposure. A number of students look at a maths question and think, I'm no good at maths, I can't do that. And if they only take 2 minutes to think about it, to think about what they do being asked, they can get full marks on it. So this shows you the math skills that will be assessed. So a common, one of the common skills that is tested is either determining the magnification or determining the actual size from the magnification. Graphs calculate the percentage increase in the mass of ethanol. So you're taking data from the graph and you are calculating the percentage increase. Always encourage students to show their working. If they get the correct answer, they'll get full marks whether they've shown their working or not. But if they don't get the correct answer, then they may get 1 out of the 2 marks for their process and the working out they carried out. And again, there are additional free resources for maths. If anybody wants to contribute to a discussion, please put things in the chat box. But I do want to make sure that we have time to look at the mark schemes. So when you're planning your course, again, Pearson produced resources to help you with this. There is a scheme of work produced by Pearson, which is detailed and it's editable. So you can adjust it to fit your lesson length, your what you want to include, the order you want to do things in. And it's designed to support the different delivery models of 1 year, 2 year, modular and linear. And you can customize it to suit your timetable, your curriculum style and your student needs. And it can be downloaded directly from the Pearson Qualifications website. There are also textbooks matched to the 2025 specification. There are linked to the textbooks are digital teaching materials via Active Learn, which includes interactive resources, worksheets, and assessments. And they are all aligned with the specification content and assessment objectives. It's a good idea to use the scheme of work as a foundation and then build in the opportunities that you want. The slides from this training are available in your delegate resources that you were sent at the start of this session. If you have any problems accessing them, possibly the other host for this session will be able to say something, tell you at the end. Alternatively, if you contact your science support, which we'll come to at the end, but these slides are available, yes. And I think you've just been given the link to them. So the resources available for the course materials, which gives you, so you've got the course planner, the guide, the mapping document, maths and practical support, past training content, scheme of work, and topic support. So I always wanted to adjust things to fit my needs, but starting with Pearson's scheme of work is a very good starting point. It makes sure you cover all the content, it gives you lots of ideas. So you've got a course planner that shows you flexible delivery options. You've got a mapping document, which helps you transition from another exam board. The scheme of work, and that actually lists the specification points to suggested lesson activities, and it's got links to resources. So this is an example of one of the lessons from the scheme of work. Tells you what students should be able to do at the end of the lesson, links it to the specification point, the learning objectives, what they will be able to do, the activities to help achieve these learning objectives, and then links to resources, and then other skills that can be covered in the lesson. So more examples from the scheme of work, shows you how you can use them. So it's got the topic subtitle, specification reference, suggested activities, suggested resources, link to the resources, linked to various external resources that are produced that can be used to teach GCSE biology, the skills that are required that can be assessed, and then additional skills that can be acquired through the teaching and delivery. And then it's got consolidation, assessment, and feedback lessons also built into the scheme of work. The resources designed for linear are also largely suitable for modular. There are getting started guides available. Which can help you because it contains an introduction to the course, key content, assessment information, and key changes. The course planners, now they're not meant to be prescriptive, they are meant to be a guide. So the lesson plan, the schemes of work followed each lesson. The course planner breaks it down into what you would plan to teach over specific time periods. and it contains notes as to which specification points and practicals, which are in italics. And again, it includes consolidation, assessment, and feedback time. We now come on to talk about the mark schemes. Right, it's quite, when you are assessing your students, it is a very good idea not only to use past questions as they become available and the sample assessment questions, but also to use the mark schemes that are published alongside them. So you become familiar with the way students are assessed, and they can also become familiar. Now, this question states one way that the incidence of mutation can be increased. It says state one way, so it's an AO1 question. It is recall of something they should have learned. So there are many ways that mutations can be increased. Radiation, UV light, tobacco, mutagen. When you've got a list of words there with an oblique line between each one, when you've got an oblique line, they are alternatives. You only need one of those words, and any one is acceptable because it asks for one way. Then you get, so this is what the, when the paper is written, this is the answer that the examiner is looking for. Then when the exam's been set, the student answers are looked at to see the type of responses they are given, and the mark scheme is updated. It is never updated to something that is incorrect. No matter how many students might have given the same incorrect answer, that the mark scheme is never updated to accommodate that because it's not correct. However, what happens is that when you look at student responses, you find ways that they have expressed themselves that you didn't anticipate, but that mean the same thing as was on the mark scheme. So that is added quite often as additional guidance to what you can accept or what you can't accept. So for this question, you can't accept infrared radiation because that's not a mutagen. You can accept smoking as an alternative to tar and tobacco. You can accept other correct mutagens if a student comes up with something that nobody's thought about, but when they write it down, it is actually correct, then the mark can be given for that. And when there's a team of examiners that mark these papers, there's the principal examiner, team leaders, and then examiners. So if an examiner has an answer that they're not sure about, whether it's correct or not, they can refer back to their team leader. So the next question is a 3-mark question, and it's an explanation. So it is AO2. Blood stem cells can be used to treat blood disorders such as sickle cell anemia. It tells you a bit about sickle cell anemia. Explain why blood stem cells can be used to treat a variety of blood disorders. So you're being asked to explain why blood stem cells can treat blood disorders. So an explanation that makes reference to 3 of the following. There are 3 marks. There are 5 possible statements that are worthy of a mark. So any 3 of those statements will gain 3 marks. If you put more than 3, you can't have more than 3 marks, but you only need to get 3 of them. But encourage your students to answer the question as fully as possible. If they write 3 things down and think, I've put 3 statements, I don't need to put any more, the statements they put might not be what is being looked for, or it might be what they think are 2 statements are in fact 1. So encourage them to give full answers, not to, although they should take account of the number of marks. If they think they've got more ideas, don't stop at those 3 marks. So we've got, they can differentiate or specialize. Oblique line, they can, it's an or, into different blood cells or any type of blood cell. The blood is underlined, so it must be included. Blood stem cells can only differentiate into blood cells, not into other types of cells. So that is important. You can allow any 2 named blood cells for 1 mark. So if they name the cells, they've got to give 2. So they can make red blood cells to transport oxygen. Now it's got and in bold. You've got to have both parts of that sentence. The red blood cells transport oxygen. Then we've got white blood cells to destroy pathogens or various other options. This is where the explain comes in. What they can make red blood cells, what do? They transport oxygen. They can make white blood cells. What do? Destroy pathogens. And then the third option, they can make platelets. What do? Help blood clotting. So it's both. They don't need the word and as such, but they need both parts of each of those statements. So on the mark scheme, the left-hand column gives the question number. The middle column gives the points written by the principal examiner, which reflect expected student responses. They don't need to write the answers exactly as worded, but key vocabulary and clarity are essential. And then the right-hand column gives additional guidance. So it clarifies what variations are acceptable under accept or allow. Ignore means that it's not incorrect, but it doesn't fully answer the question. So you treat the word or phrase as if it's not there. And do not allow or reject means that the mark can't be awarded. So underlined words must be included. Bold words are required or a very close synonym. Smooth brackets are optional, but the meaning must still be present. Now the curly brackets, we didn't see any on that mark scheme, but the curly brackets means within the curly brackets there will be 2 or more options. One of those options must be present. And the mark can be awarded if the scientific idea is clear, the key vocabulary is used accurately, the point aligns with the intention of the mark scheme. So all questions are point-based. The mark schemes clearly list what's credit-worthy for each question. Marks are awarded per marking point, not for the overall quality or flow. It's about scientific accuracy and relevance. They don't have to write long essays. They need to focus on precise terminology, clear explanations, and well-structured responses. Right, we have got just over 5 minutes left for you to, and we've got one more bit to look at support from Pearson, which I can go through quite quickly. What I would like is for you to put in the chat box any questions that you've got, anything that I haven't explained properly, and some idea as to if and how this CPD has helped you. So we've not got many minutes left, so if you could do that quite quickly in the chat box. At least say whether or not how the training has helped you. Or any questions. Am I going to get anything from anybody? We will quickly look at the support available. Oh, good, somebody. Thank you. Right, we'll quickly go through the support from Pearson, and then that will give just a couple of minutes for any questions at the end. So we've covered some of it already, but there is support. There's plenty of support available on the website in the specification, course materials. Good. It's good to know. Got specification, past papers, teaching and learning materials, past training content. You can have a look at past training content. Results Plus is one of the most useful things that, well, it's not the only one, it's a very useful tool that Pearson makes available to you because it analyzes your learners' exams, your learners' performance in actual exams. And it can be used for different types of analysis. So it can analyze how your school compares to a similar cohort. It can compare your results over time. It can look at individual students. So it's a very, very useful tool. Exam Wizard is also available, which has a complete bank of questions. Access to scripts we have covered, but again, very useful. And then in addition, there are paid for resources. So all the ones on the website are free. The question about access to support, even if we don't teach at a school, I think, can I have an answer to that? From Antoinette, please, could you possibly answer that question for me? And the paid for resources are the student book. There are other student books, but it is quite useful to start with the Pearson one that follows the course. You also have your own partner support. They're here to support you throughout the year. And Jonathan Wong is the International Sciences support, and that is his phone number and email address. You can access these slides afterwards, but I will leave that up in case you want to get it down, write it down, and we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. So any question, and I think it disappears after that, any questions that you've got, if you very quickly put them into the chat box now, I can answer them. And I'd also like to thank you all for participating in today's event, and I hope it's been useful to you. So if you've got any comments or questions, please put them in the chat box now. Thank you. Any more questions or comments before we go? I hope you will all enjoy teaching the modular biology. Say any questions? Thank you for all attending, and I hope it has been helpful to you all. And thank you for your participation this morning.